Going to WHOW Ag listeners several times a day. From tariffs to treaties, from the Board of Trade to the running board on your truck, I cover Central Illinois agriculture every day on the Farm Gate. Hear it all on WHOW's many platforms on the radio or online. Join me, Stu Ellis, for the Farm Gate.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Top of the morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest in this segment of the program, Andrea Kocher with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County. Good morning, Andrea. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for asking, and thanks for making time for us. Good to have you on the program. And so, Andrea, one thing we're going to highlight today, and we're going to start with this, is Willow Tree Missions. A great service, a great resource for folks in Piatt County. Unfortunately, you can't do everything for folks that are in a domestic violence situation, and you have to partner and you have to find other resources to help those in those situations navigate the things they're going through and particularly their needs in certain situations. So let's highlight, maybe some of your partners and those other resources within the Piatt County community and Piatt County area. Where do we start with this conversation?
Yeah, so when somebody comes to us because they've either been in a domestic relationship or they are or living one or wanting to leave it, or honestly, even if they're wanting to stay in one, we kind of, our specialty is the domestic violence aspect of the relationship itself. However, there's a lot more that goes into the experience the person's having. For example, if a person's experiencing financial abuse, which we've talked about pretty extensively, in order to get out of a relationship, there's got to be kind of a framework of services set up in place to help that person. So we rely on other agencies. There's no way we could afford to set up everyone who came to us. So we work together with other services like Dove Financial Services, Community Action, Salvation Army, area churches, things like that, to all come together to pool our resources so that we can cover more ground and get people the help that they need to get out.
Sure. So now what is, when someone comes in, Andrea, what is the first thing they need oftentimes that you see?
Yeah, the number one is a safe space, whether that safe space be in their home, in shelter, in hotel, with a friend, wherever it is. The priority is always, how can we keep you safe today? Sometimes that also means that we need to involve the court system and get someone in before a judge to get an order of protection. Mm-hmm. So that becomes another avenue of services in the community that we use to help utilize that piece of a person's safety.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dive into that safe environment, that living environment, specifically. Let's start there. How, what does it look like when you're trying to get someone somewhere safe to stay, and maybe kind of walk through the process of maybe they don't have family, or, they've been, kind of shut out from their friends. And so, their need when confronted by their friends over that, or they say, hey, I could use a place to stay. Maybe they've been blindsided. The friend is blindsided because they haven't heard from this individual. They may not know the situation, whatever the case may be. And so spur of the moment like that, can't offer that support. How do you navigate that situation?
Absolutely. So a big thing is you hit on so many really important things. A big thing we know as domestic violence professionals is that it typically takes someone up to 9 times before they actually leave their relationship. 9 trial and errors before they're finally able to break free from it. If you've been relying on friends and family the previous 8 times, it can become really tricky because a family member that's not experiencing the domestic violence doesn't understand why you keep going back or why you're not able to completely break free. So your resources from family members can become pretty limited depending on how many times they've already helped. Another problem we see with that is that family members just don't want to get involved. They want that to be a problem of yours, not theirs. They don't want to make either party mad. A big problem in domestic violence is oftentimes behind closed door situations. So when family members do talk about it, and friends, they had no idea it was going on. And there can be some issues with believability, despite the fact that likely the person requesting help from their friends and family really does need it and has really good intentions behind while they're asking for it. So we as professionals have to lean in kind of outside of family and friends when we can and utilize things like we utilize hotel stays a little bit. We really push into shelter services to get people completely safe. But beyond that, homelessness becomes a real issue and is a real crisis for individuals in domestic violence because they don't have a lot of resources. And oftentimes the resources they did have are tied to their partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was going to say next is, so much of their probably finances is tied up with their, like you said, with their partner. They probably control the money or if they even let them work, and let them have money,
100%.
So that's certainly another avenue, and one thing I was wondering there as you were talking to Andrea, when it comes to shelter for these individuals and their families, is there the resources to find shelter? Do we have the hotel space? Do we have the partnerships with those businesses? Do we have the shelters themselves?
Yeah.
Do we have the resources there to find? Because you mentioned the homelessness crisis that comes with this discussion. Do we have the resources? Is this an area where we need to work on?
Yeah. So there are absolutely resources available. However, there's like anything, there's never enough.
Mm-hmm.
We're fortunate with great shelter services in this area. There are shelter services in Springfield. WHOW offers shelter services in Decatur. We use Courage Connection out of Champaign. We use HOPE out of Mattoon Charleston area. But there are often times that we have to look for space as far away as Peoria, Bloomington, Quincy, other areas, because unfortunately, the need is just as big as those communities as it is here locally, and we don't have local shelter services.
Andrea Kocher with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County is my guest on the phone here for this morning. So when we get shelter in place, by the way, did I miss anything on the shelter piece, Andrea, you want to put out there we didn't mention?
Nope.
When you get shelter in place, you mentioned maybe those orders of protection and getting folks connected to the court system becomes maybe that next priority. Maybe walk us through what that looks like, because, navigating that judicial system is a challenge on its own for so many people who either may not be familiar with it or this is an aspect of it they're new to. How about that?
Yeah, so most of the time when someone comes for an order of protection, they've never been to court before. They have no idea what to expect. They don't know what that system's going to look like. So we highly recommend utilizing someone like myself to advocate with them and help be there for every kind of step throughout the process. We have great relationships with our circuit clerk's offices and state's attorney's office so that we can work together. A big misconception for people is that if you go to court, you're guaranteed legal representation. That is not the case in civil cases, and an order of protection is a civil case. So you are not, like the legal system does not provide you with an attorney whenever you're filing an order of protection. It has to be something that you financially secure yourself through a private attorney, or we make referrals to an organization called Land of Lincoln Legal Aid, who based on like income criteria and circumstance is able to offer free services. However, like anything else, it's utilized so frequently, it's just they don't have enough to provide for everyone either.
That's man, that's tough. That sounds like it's going to leave a lot of people in a bind, because their finances, like we just talked about, their finances might be tied up with their partner, or they haven't worked, or they can't work, or maybe they work limited hours because of their partner's abuse and those sorts of things. That seems like an inequity, a massive inequity.
Correct. Yeah, it is a struggle. Every day we see people who are representing themselves or representing themselves pro se every day in civil matters because the resources are so limited, and financially it can get so expensive.
Yeah.
To pay for counsel.
That, Andrea, I couldn't see your face obviously, but that seems like that's a frustration for you.
it can be really frustrating. It can be very frustrating. Not so much yes, for me, but the heartbreak that clients or people who are experiencing domestic violence have to go through to then also face hurdles with representation in the legal system.
Yeah. Now, I feel like I'm really diving in the weeds with this one. Does that work out for them oftentimes? I mean, are judges and court systems sympathetic to the situation these individuals are in?
Yeah, so I can't speak to a judge being sympathetic. I've never experienced that. I have experienced our judges being very fair, is I think the best way I can describe that. Civil matters are tricky. Oftentimes abusers are also not able to provide themselves with legal counsel, sometimes because they can't find someone to represent them based on what they've been accused of, but also because many times they don't have the financial resources either based on their circumstance. So it can get really interesting in court whenever two individuals are representing themselves, and kind of how successful or unsuccessful that can be.
Oh man, that just that hurts to hear, Andrea. It really does. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it is, but it just hurts to hear that.
Sure, it can be very frustrating.
Well, on that note, Andrea, let's take a time out and we'll talk about other resources that you tap into to help folks navigate their domestic, escaping and ridding themselves of a domestic abuse situation. But in the meantime, where do folks go to learn about all things Willow Tree Missions? How about that?
Yeah, you can go to our website for sure, which is willowtreemissions.org, or give us a call at 217-631-1018.
That is Andrea Kocher with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County, my guest on the phone. Plenty more to get to with Andrea coming up on the WHOW Morning Show.
WHOW.
B.org. Let's check the markets now on the RFD Radio Network. I'm Jim Taylor. Corn mostly lower, beans higher, and wheat trading lower at this hour. July corn up a penny, 6.09. September corn down 5 3/4, 5.28 3/4. December corn 5.34 1/4, down 6 3/4. July beans 13.62 1/2, up 9 1/4. August beans up 5 1/4, 12.71. November new crop 11.84, down 3/4. July wheat 6.22 1/2, down 5 1/4. September wheat down 6.34. July bean meal $3.99.50, up $2.80. July bean oil $51.26, up 34 cents. Livestock market, August feeders $243.55, up 30 cents. June live cattle up 97 cents, 180.80. June lean hogs 87.85, down 45 cents. Energy market, July crude oil 72.73, up 99 cents. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
More than 80 million Americans depend on AM radio for their news, weather, sports, and a community connection. It's the backbone of the emergency alert system. It's critical that we keep AM radio in cars, because when cell and internet services are down, this free emergency service could be your only lifeline. Text AM to 52886 and tell Congress we need AM radio in cars.
Message and data rates may apply. You may receive up to 4 messages a month, and you may text STOP to stop.
This message furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters.
Hey, this is Todd Gleason from Illinois Extension here with a time change for our daily market report on WHOW. You can now catch our daily review of the commodity markets at 5:06 on all of WHOW's many platforms. You'll still hear all of our commodity analysts and weather professionals each afternoon, but at a brand new time. And you'll still hear the weekly wrap-up of the commodity markets right here on WHOW when Commodity Week airs Saturdays at 8:30 a.m. Remember the time change for the daily closing market report on WHOW at our new time, 5:06 p.m. weekdays.
Your friend in Central Illinois. WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. Our guest on the morning show this morning is Andrea Kocher with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County. Andrea, today we're highlighting services and referrals, places that folks that you're helping in a domestic violence situation, you're kind of directing them through everything. We've hit on establishing a safe place, a safe environment, whether that be temporary, somewhat permanent, whatever that looks like for that person. And then also that court system and getting those orders of protection and things of that nature. What comes next after those two? What do you see, most commonly? Where do folks need to go after that? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so one that kind of goes in between there, or sometimes afterwards too, is a big partner of ours is law enforcement, local law enforcement. Obviously, both the sheriff's office and local police departments. Our relationship with them is really complex because as the domestic violence professionals, we offer them the support they need for when they are out on calls and kind of the first responders to that experience. We offer education and resources and things to our officers directly. But to go along with that, we also utilize law enforcement and accompany our clients as they're giving statements or speaking with law enforcement and kind of help settle some of those nerves and be an advocate for our clients, even as they're presenting themselves to law enforcement, whether it be to file charges against someone or just get advice from them on how to navigate the legal system and what they should do next in their relationship.
Yeah, for sure. So I know law enforcement is probably very, very willing to work with you on matters like this, right?
Absolutely. We have such a great relationship with our local law enforcement. We also consider ourselves really fortunate in Piatt County to have officers who are willing to take steps to help eradicate the issues of domestic violence in our area.
How so?
Our officers are willing to meet our victims where they're at. They come to our offices. They will have us at their offices. They'll go to someone's house. Whatever it is that's necessary to help our victims feel comfortable and feel safe. Many victims of domestic violence never go to the police. And sometimes a reason that we hear for that is because they don't feel like the police hear them. And that is not something that we hear locally here in this county.
That's good. That's really good. That's good. So what happens after, law enforcement gets involved? Where are other places that these folks need to be directed to? Where else do they need to head?
Yeah, so something I want to hit on with law enforcement too, kind of before I move away from that.
Yeah, please.
We're really fortunate here as well to have a school resource officer. So oftentimes our victims it's not just an adult victim. A lot of times we have children who are involved in the situation as well. And we are really, really fortunate to have Deputy Bross in our school district where we, if necessary, can reach out to her and say, hey, this is going on. This individual in your school system that you're going to be in is having a really tough time understanding what's going on at home, whether it be dad has had to move out, or maybe they even carry some fears about the fact that the dad may look for them at school. And she's able to kind of help smooth over some of those fears and bring a calmness to the child to know she's here, she knows what's going on, and she's got your back.
Well, and also, Andrea, we had this conversation last summer, I remember, with you and Jill and Officer Bross, and that's one thing that we talked about even was that sometimes maybe that student is going through a situation on their own, and Officer Bross perhaps could be a resource for them in that scenario.
100%. We're just fortunate in Piatt County to have somebody like her in our schools where, yes, she can be a resource. If somebody were to come to me, I can then assist them in getting in touch with her if the situation requires that of a familiar face law enforcement person that they already have a relationship with.
Sure. Very good. Very good. Well, Andrea, anything again else on law enforcement that we didn't touch on you want to put out there before we move along this morning?
No, that was one of the most important things, I guess, for us locally here in Piatt County on how we're really able to utilize them as a tool, and they really help us do our jobs better. And we hope that we're able to do the same for them. Now,
what else? What other resources do these folks need to tap into in their journey from getting out of a situation, and then maybe even beyond that? So, once they're out and they're seemingly on their own and doing well, what are some other places they need to turn that you can help them with?
Absolutely. So once basic needs are met, I would say, in my opinion, one of the most important is mental health services.
Mhm.
It is tough. It is tough to end a relationship, whether that relationship was unhealthy. The end of a relationship is still the end of a relationship. So then tag with that all of the emotional distress likely from extremely poor self-esteem and having been for sure verbally or emotionally abused over a long period of time, but also maybe beyond that as well into some physical and other types. Mental health is a really, really big piece to helping someone stay away from or out of domestic situations, increasing that self-esteem and increasing that self-worth. While we're able to do true domestic violence counseling here at our office, beyond that, if there are other mental health issues, we refer out to professionals on that end. Here in Pike County, we utilize typically Kirby Medical Center and the Pike County Mental Health Center. We work so closely with both of those organizations and getting our clients the help that they need.
Well, and you're talking about individuals that have been just broken down emotionally, mentally, it's, spiritually in some instances. I mean, my goodness, it would be almost impossible to ignore that, I would think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of times victims of domestic violence have been trying to seek services on their own. And a lot of times their partners have inhibited them from receiving those services that they've needed as another way of controlling them and to prevent them from leaving the relationship and gaining healthy characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No question. Andrea, a few minutes yet still. Any other partners, any other resources that you point folks to in a time of need?
Yeah, a really big one I want to hit on, at least briefly, is that senior citizens or people over the age of 65 are kind of a unique group that experience a lot more domestic violence than I wish was happening. Oftentimes more in financial and verbal, but it can also be physical and sexual as well, of course. But what we see a lot is family members who are financially exploiting senior citizens or senior citizens who are experiencing verbal or emotional abuse as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we partner very closely with Care Horizon Adult Protective Services out of Champaign. They are our adult protective services agency, but also they provide such great resources to that community of people to help them maintain their independence and their sense of independence away from the person who's been abusing them. We also have general services for seniors that can help guide and direct them towards financial services, their in-home needs. A lot of times people need in-home care. They're receiving that from an individual who isn't treating them the way that they should be treated. So we refer our older populations to get those services outside of family members or outside of their abusive person, so that it doesn't end their quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Andrea, I know we've got more to dive into. Wish we could go further with the conversation, but in the meantime, where do folks go to learn about all things Willow Tree Missions?
Absolutely. Of course, on our website at willowtreemissions.org or by phone, call me anytime at 217-631-1018.
Andrea Kocher with Willow Tree Missions in Pike County, my guest. Network News is now.
The Big 1520 WHOW Clinton, 92.3 FM, W222 BG Clinton, 106.5 FM, W293 DJ Norm.